All right. Welcome, everyone. So today we're going to talk about the energy transition, the German Energiewende. And with me on stage, I have Professor Ortwin Renn, who has already shown his dedication by handing you all a leaflet, so you're fully informed about what we're going to talk about. Ortwin is also the scientific director of the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies and has been responsible for the survey that you all hold in your hands. It's a combination of focus groups and a survey of over 7,500 households. And we thought we'd keep it nice and easy. I'll be asking you some questions, and then we'll open it up to the floor so you have some time to also ask your questions. I guess the first question is, is there are plenty of surveys on the Energiewende, on like attitudes and all that stuff, and I was wondering, why do we need another one, and what makes this one special?
Well, thank you very much, Patricia, and also thanks everyone for being here and sharing with us the experiences about inequality and fairness with respect to energy transformations. When we looked at the surveys all over Germany and also in Europe about what kind of issues were addressed, we found out that the issue of perceived fairness was hardly addressed at all. Most surveys ask about, do you like the transformation? Are you in favor of it? What do you do in order to support it? But we have very few surveys that actually ask for the perceived fairness, perceived justice in a way that the Energiewende, the German Energiewende, or the energy transformation, has changed the burdens, the benefits, and the costs with respect to the population and with respect to different groups. And so this was a survey that specifically addressed that issue.
Thank you. But when you say perceived fairness, that seems like it's a pretty sort of vague issue. Something that might be perceived as really unfair by some person might be totally fine to another. Would you like to talk a little bit about the methods you used in order to make this really useful?
Well, we asked ourselves first, of course, what does fairness mean? And of course, we have plenty of definitions. But we basically try to decompose into three different aspects. One is the distributional fairness. So do people believe that the benefits and also the costs are fairly distributed among the various constituencies? The second thing was fairness in terms of participation in the decision-making process. And the third one was fairness with respect to what they believe society asks them to do, if that was an unfair burden on them, or if that's something that they feel is justified because of the urgency of the energy transformation. So these were the three major aspects. And the first one, basically saying about distributional fairness, we try to operationalize in two ways. One way is we ask directly a question, for example, how fair do you think is the distribution of costs and benefits? Do you feel that you're disadvantaged by the energy transformation? Do you believe that others are privileged and you not? So all these kind of questions we ask. And the second part, we asked questions about, do you feel that your voice is being heard politically? Do you have any possibility to co-determine energy supply in your own community? Do you feel empowered in your community or not? And the third type of question was, what do you feel people expect from you? Do you feel that that is fair, or do you feel that it's not fair, that a lot of the energy transformation is based on your shoulders and others don't have to do much? So these were the three major issues that we addressed, and we had a quantitative survey, as you said, with 7,800 households in Germany that is fairly representative, but also with so-called focus groups. So we had small groups discuss with each other so that we can also see how these thoughts develop when they are in an intensive exchange among the people that are affected.
And what can you say then about fairness? Like, what determines how fair people perceive the energy transition to be?
Yeah, I mean, the results, of course, we don't have a benchmark and say, look, 3% is fine, 30% is not fine. But it was very interesting. I mean, we had at the beginning, we just added some general questions like, do you think that the transformation is necessary? And around 78% said yes. And we also asked, do you believe that you should contribute your share to the Energiewende? So do you feel that it's justified that you are also part of this and that you have to take part in this? And again, we had something like 75% saying yes. So this is very clear. People understood, yes, energy transition is necessary. We believe it's true. And this was almost, supported by all different groups, political groups, social groups, cultural groups. So there was hardly any difference. But when we asked, what do you think about the Energiewende in Germany in terms of, are the costs equally distributed? And then we could see, 68% said no, it's not. We believe we pay more than others. And if we ask them, for example, if you feel that they are fairly treated, so number 3, we again have 48% saying, well, we don't feel fairly treated. That doesn't mean 50% said they were fairly treated, with only 22. The rest said more or less or more, though they couldn't really make up their mind. But it was a fairly large amount saying, no, I think they put an unfair burden on our shoulders. And when we asked if they feel that they had enough empowerment in the communities, that was a little bit, let's say, more equally distributed among people who said yes or no. We had 20% saying no, we believe we should have more power, but there were also 18% saying, well, we have too much power, people are just too much participation in Germany, and the rest was part. So we could see that there was a division there about how political power should be distributed, but it was very clear in terms of economic distribution, but also in the distribution of general expectations towards citizens. They felt almost a majority, or closely a majority, 48%, the second question, believed that this was not done fairly. And that, of course, is a signal that people feel, yes, we think energy transformation is necessary, but the way it's being done, we believe, is putting us into an unfair position, and we want this to be reformed.
And maybe leading us towards thinking more about sort of the global implications also of this. I noticed, I think for me, one of the most striking results in this is that across all political parties in Germany, pretty much people tend to agree that Energiewende is a good thing, but there's a sort of significant downturn towards the people who vote AfD. Mm-hmm. So this sort of new nationalism, is that something that maybe we can say global issues like climate change, they don't care as much about? Or is it something to do with economic struggles? Mm-hmm. Is there a correspondence?
Yeah, well, that's fairly interesting. I mean, we also asked, for party preferences, and you may be aware that also Germany has a populist right-wing party, AfD. And the interesting thing was that even the AfD followers said they believe Energiewende is necessary, the majority, not all of them, much less than the other parties, but still. They also favored that renewable energy would be, important. However, 16% in total said we don't believe in anthropogenic climate change, and AfD, it was 62%. So you could see a huge difference between the German population in general and the AfD voters specifically. And there are other indicators. We had several other surveys in which we also had that question included. And one of the interesting results is also being backed up by the other surveys in Germany, that the most striking correlation, if you are an AfD voter or not, is the question whether you feel privileged or disadvantaged by globalization. So if you feel that globalization is something from which you benefit, it's very unlikely that you vote for a populist right party. If you feel you're strongly disadvantaged from globalization and that, that your skills are not really necessary anymore, that you feel that, you know, you are having all these economic but also social disadvantages, then it is much more likely that you are one of these right-wing voters. And we could see this also here in the survey, that any issues that went with kind of global energy changes, or that we should do something also to export the energy transformation to other countries, AfD voters said, no, that's not our business. You know, we want national, yes, it's fine to go through, to a transition, because it also helps us to get rid of oil and gas, everything that we export from the outside world, but this is not something where we should help the others.
That seems a bit crazy to me.
Yes, well, I mean, you know, the world is crazy. No, this is not a very good remark. But the thing is, I mean, you know, yes, it is difficult sometimes for people, like everybody is probably sitting in the room, who've been cosmopolitan, who travel a lot, and, you know, are also taking the advantages of this, you know, global world communication and transformation. But there are quite a few people everywhere. And I mean, you have to ask yourself, why is Donald Trump voted president of the United States? Why do we have 20 to 30% people in France and Netherlands and Italy who vote for populist parties? Well, it is because these people feel that they are divorced from the benefits of globalization, and the belief that going back to a nationalist attitude is something that could help them to get more social recognition. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a very valuable thing we need to take into account. And so some of the issues that we are dealing with right now also in our institute here at the Institute of Advanced Sustainability Studies, we're trying to work with communities, for example, communities that have been characterized by coal mining for many, many decades. Of course, the people there feel, you know, really disprivileged, because they say, well, you know, we used to be the elite in the workforce. Miners were always the elite. Now, nobody wants to talk to us anymore. You know, we are the bad guys. And they vote AfD, also in Germany. So this is very clear. So we need to find something in terms of a transition for them, that the transformation towards more renewable energy, towards more sustainable practices, that they feel that they can also gain from this process and not just lose.
Thank you. Maybe we can open it up to the audience if you have any questions. Yes, please. Do you need the mic, or do you think you can just speak loudly?
Hopefully I can speak.
All right, excellent.
Okay, yeah, I have a question in terms of, oh, thank you. Hi. Yeah, so I have a question in terms of the distribution of how you're actually going to like harness and make new renewable energies. From the Canadian experience, those tends to be in the countryside more. So if you have the wind turbines or dams that affect more like farmland or country land that will be flooded and whatnot. And what we've seen is there's then high support in urban areas for renewable energies because it benefits them and they don't really they aren't affected by the transition. And then in the countryside where not as much energy is being used, they're the ones who bear the like direct impacts of these transitions. And I was wondering how, if the survey takes this into account or if the Energiewende does, in terms of, you know, going back to fairness, in terms of how is this transition going to affect different areas and different people?
Yeah, thank you very much. A very interesting question. I mean, Germany has not such a distinctive differentiation between rural and urban areas. I mean, there are very urban areas and there are, of course, rural areas, but the kind of life culture is not so much distinct. It's a little bit more in the East German parts than in the West German parts. So if we look at attitude distribution within the population, rural versus urban doesn't make much of a difference in terms of attitudes. That's very different in other European countries. That's one point. The second point is that interestingly enough, there are a lot of urban communities that want to be kind of self-sufficient, even autonomous in terms of energy production. And it's, of course, it's easy, as you said, if you have a lot of land around you, you can put, solar panels on your roof, you can put windmills around it. And if you have a few people to provide energy for, you can do it almost to 100% or more. Now, if you live in a very dense urban environment, like Munich or in Berlin or something, that of course is much different. We have, 1,000-2,000 people on a square meter. But nevertheless, I mean, there have been very interesting plans also to use renewable energy on roofs, on facade of houses. You can, of course, in terms of heat, you can really insulate houses much better than you've done in the past. So there is a lot of potential also in urban areas. But nevertheless, and that comes back to fairness, it's very clear that some of the energy, specifically renewable energy, that's been produced in rural area has to be transported to city areas. And interesting enough, we asked for that, if that is an issue for the rural population, that some of their energy production is, transported to the city. There was not any real problem with that. And interesting also that, in our survey, people said offshore wind energy, which is only, feasible if you transport it to urban cities, had even a better reputation than windmills have been built, in the countryside. That's partially because people don't see it on the sea, that of course is a reason. But there was not a big fairness issue connected to urban versus rural. And I think that's an interesting finding in itself.
Do you think that might change? Because space is becoming a big issue for renewables, right? I mean, you need a lot more space to produce renewable energies than you would if you just have like a power plant.
Well, we see differences now in Germany. I mean, the one thing is if you talk about solar energy is extremely well liked in Germany, but most of solar energy is on roofs. So you don't need space, the space is there. And so this is a kind of, if you put solar panels on roofs, unless it's something that has some cultural heritage, is protected, you can do it everywhere, and there's hardly, I haven't seen any sign for protests there. If you do it on, free landscapes, and you just put a lot of solar panels just on plain land, people start to say, why, are you using our land to transport it to somewhere else? And so there may be something popping up. But at this point, it's very rare in Germany that we put solar panels not on roofs, but just on plain land. It's different for wind energy. And what we could see was that in the first major construction period, people really endorsed wind energy. They found that that was cool. The second one, they said, well, we probably need it for the transformation. Now, a lot of people say enough is enough. So this is a kind of a scaling issue. And specifically where a lot of windmills have been built, people have started to become resistant against additional windmills adjacent to the ones that already exist. And that is something where we can see now people in a different fairness issue and saying what I said with the number 3, we already have taken so much burden for the energy transformation. We have to look at these 100 windmills every day. Don't put it another 100 here. So that was but it's not so much the transportation issue, but the issue of, we have taken our share and we've shown that we are, willing to support, but not on the cost of somebody else.
Right. Maybe first there and then you, please.
Okay, thank you. Hello, thank you very much. I have a question concerning citizen energy cooperatives. Did you include as well questions concerning people feeling ready to engage themselves in the energy transition and see the transition as a kind of opportunity in place of seeing it as a burden? So yeah, that would be interesting to me. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. We asked that question. I mean, if people would be willing to, join cooperatives, or if they would like to invest in, solar or wind energy plant, a community energy plant, and we get something like 8 to 12% to say we would be willing to do that. So that's not a huge amount. But there are around 28% are saying, well, they could think about it. It's not they would do it, but they said, yes, we could consider it. And there was only something like, I have to look it up, 14% that said, I would never do that. And a lot of people said, I don't know enough about it. Well, probably not. So there was kind of still an insecurity about whether that is a good idea or not. So, yes, when we ask people what they do for the energy transformation, 93% saying, oh, we save energy. We buy these new light bulbs and so on. And even 60% said that they changed their lifestyle in order to consume less energy. Well, this is verbal behavior, of course. But then, of course, to say I invest in something, then it's getting, as I said, we're getting around to 10 to 20%, and to join a cooperative, it's less than 10%. That they would definitely do it, and 8% said they had already done it.
In the orange, mustard.
My question is about costs. I understand that the transformation's been relatively high cost so far. Do people, I'm looking at page 10 where you kind of go into that.
Yep.
Could you talk about how people view the actual cost, which is largely, do they view it personally, or do they view it paid by the government taxes?
Yeah, well, this is a very interesting question, because, we ask people also personally if they feel that, energy prices have increased and if they felt concerned about it. And yes, a lot of people, for around 60%, that they are concerned about it. Interesting enough, 78% of the people we asked had no idea how much money they spend on electricity. So there was this general feeling, yes, it's getting more expensive, but I have no idea how much. And partially it's because, you have an automatic billing system, it automatically deducts from your account. And for most people that are not, let's say, on the 10% lowest level in income, electricity is still not something that really takes a large part of your salary or of your income. So most people were not sure about it. There were also a whole set of people we asked about their electricity costs. They added electricity plus heat together, because very often the additional costs in your rental agreement puts both together, and then becomes significant. Heat is really the one that takes a large amount of people's income. So if the average household in Germany pays something between 400, 600 euros a year for electricity, but something like 2,000 for heat. So that's a substantive increase. So in that sense, but very often they were not sure what they were paying for one or the other. It was different for the 10 or 20% lowest income people, specifically those who live on welfare. For them, of course, energy cost is a substantive amount. And they felt more than others that they were treated unfairly, because the German industry that has, or the part of the German industry that is very energy intensive, does not have to pay for the extra cost for developing renewable energy. And they felt, well, all these big companies get away with it, and we as welfare recipients don't get away with it. So this was very, very strongly echoed in the survey.
Any last questions? All right, then maybe your final takeaway, if we take nothing from this session, but the one thing that you're going to say now.
Yes, well, it's always difficult to come up with one final sentence. But I think my, the lessons that I took from the survey, but also from many discussions that I had, is that, we have been very good in trying to make the energy transition technically feasible, economically somehow, acceptable. But we haven't looked so much into the distributional impacts and distribution in a very broad sense, also political empowerment and others, and that the enthusiasm for the German energy transition may collapse if politicians are not really taking care or considering this discontent with the distributional impacts, because that's what people really get worried about. They worry about environmental impacts, but they also worry about that they're not treated fairly. And one of the signals there that really caught our mind was that when we asked the people, who do you believe from the political parties in Germany is competent in energy transformation, the largest percentage was 23% saying none of the three parties. And then the one that got the highest support was the Green Party, which is not Green Party based on that. But still it was only 22%, sorry, 28%, but not 22%. And the one thing that, of course, was very difficult for the Social Democrats, who have a hard time now in Germany, that most voters of the Social Democrats Party said they didn't feel that their party was competent. And furthermore, they said the Green Party is more competent than their own party, which is, again, something that shows that competence, assignment of competence, of trustworthiness, of confidence in the parties is low. And I think part of that is not that they're not technically good. I mean, technology, I think, is very well established. It's also not that they don't care about economics. It's they don't really see the social impacts. And if you ignore them, then people feel, politics is not competent. They don't care about what we think. And I think that's my major message. Politicians, wake up.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your interest, and thank you, Ortwin.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. Yeah, great questions. Yeah.